Hi, I'm Jazz Tankey, Senior Artisans Editor at Variety, and welcome to you all. I am absolutely delighted to be here today for this conversation on Licorice Pizza, and I'm here with the film stars Alana Haim and Cooper Hoffman, as well as the film's writer and director Paul Thomas Anderson. Hello and welcome.
Hi.
A virtual reunion. I'm sorry this is not in person, but Paul, this has been with you for some time. I mean, take us back to the beginning, like where the idea began for you to be like, I want to share some nostalgic, moments with an audience.
Nostalgia is never that far away from my fingertips. I have a hobby of reading old newspapers, really for fun, honestly. It's a preoccupation of mine. So you sort of pick a year or a month and I'll go back and I'll look up things and find that either if I was alive at that time, it flashes me back and reminds me of that time, or if it was a time that I wasn't born in, I'm always kind of fascinated to see what was going on. So I've been in the 70s before to make films, and I truthfully had no real desire to go back there again, feeling like I'd done it. But the pull of this story was so strong. The episodes of bizarre kind of stranger than fiction things that my friend Gary Getzman, who's kind of a notorious Hollywood producer, had this crazy life, as a child actor and making waterbeds and a PR company with his mom. He raised his younger brother. All of these things, these episodes that you see in the movie are really true and really couldn't be transplanted anywhere else but where they really happened, which is the early 70s. So those things really made me excited, but not necessarily enough to write a movie about. And it was really my relationship with Alana and working with her that made me feel like there was a kind of vehicle or reason to tell these stories. A million years ago, I had an idea of this kid bothering this girl at picture day, and that always stuck with me. And this was a chance to write that story.
And here we are with it's so incredible. And just before we started, we were talking about how incredible Cooper and Alana were. Like, it's your acting debut. Alana, take us back to the first thing Paul actually said to you about Licorice Pizza.
It really started with, funny enough, when hearing Paul talk about newspaper clippings. Paul would send me newspaper clippings from the era, a lot about pinball machines, a lot about Gary's mom, Mama Anita. And then I got the script when I was in London, and I read it and I was so obsessed with it. And of course, I called Paul to gush about it. And he asked if I would play Alana. And of course, I said yes. And then I went to bed and realized, what did I just get myself into? How did this happen? But I loved the script so much and I loved all the stories. And I knew if I had Paul by my side that I could do it. And here we are.
Cooper, talk about playing Gary and, again, what did Paul say to you about it? And what was it about the script that was like, yes, this is where I want to introduce myself to the world?
Paul sent me the script and he basically called me and he said, hey, I'm working on this new thing. I just want you to read it just to see what you think. And I read it and I loved it, obviously. And I loved Gary and I loved the relationship between Gary and Alana. And then I called Paul after reading the script and I say how much I enjoy it. And I also like the fact that, Gary has just a mother, and I think I can relate to that. And I just kind of said how much I enjoyed it. And he then said, I'm coming to New York to do a bunch of other auditions, and I want just you to read it just to see what it sounds like read out loud. I read it with Alana, and I kind of don't know whether it was falling in love with acting or just being in a room with these two people or doing something creative that I always knew that I kind of wanted to do. But I just knew I wanted to do something in it, whether it was playing Gary or whatever it is. I had an idea that Paul wanted me to do something, but I didn't know exactly what it was. And then we went out into like the streets of New York and we're just kind of going through lines and talking. And I said to Paul after lunch that we had that day, I said, I want to do this. I don't know what exactly it is, but I want to play Gary. I want to have some part in this. And then it was a long process from there. It didn't end right there. That was kind of the tipping point. But it was basically the whole time I kind of couldn't stop thinking about Gary. And I don't know exactly what it was about the character or the script, but I think it kind of happens when you read something or you watch something or you experience art. It just kind of pulls you or makes you feel a certain kind of way. And that's what the script did. And I can't pinpoint a certain part about Gary that's so interesting. I think he's interesting as just any other human is. I don't know what it exactly was, but it pulled me, and I love Paul the most, and I love Alana. And it was so great to,
I'd like to just point out just a few minor inaccuracies in his story that I want to correct. Number one, I sent him the script and it took him days to get to it. And I was
2 days. It took me 2 days.
Don't argue. Let's Jazz. Days were ticking by as I was waiting eagerly to hear from this young actor of what he thought of the screenplay. And I guess he was too busy doing something to get to it. So I had to follow up and say, if you have any free time, would you mind terribly just to please read the script? And then he eventually did. But the truth is that he probably saw right through what I was doing, which is that I was lying to him. I was saying, I'd like you to just read the script with me, and just so I can hear it out loud. But secretly I was just sort of plotting my attack.
He is right. I kind of got off the phone with him afterwards and sat in my chair that's in my room. And I was sitting down having a talk with Paul, and we ended the call. And I said to myself, he wants me to do something. I honestly didn't know exactly what it was. I mean, I figured it was Gary just because it was the role I liked, and I felt like I was the most alike out of all of the other people in the script. But I did sit in the chair and I was like, Paul never calls me this much. Like, there's got to be something going on here.
He knew, and you kept him waiting. Let's talk about the truck scene. Alana, you had to learn how to drive a stick shift, right, for this, which is a huge thing for Americans.
Not for anybody else, but for Americans, it's a really big deal.
But it's not just the stick shift. You're also learning to drive a massive truck. Like, talk about seeing that in the script and then going to Paul and having conversations about this scene.
The closest thing that I had to movie magic was the Universal Backlot tour. So I knew there's these things called stunt drivers. So reading the script, I was like, oh, we're going to get, a stunt driver to do this. There's no way. I don't know how to drive stick shifts. And then I quickly realized, no, I'm going to have to do this myself. That was my initial prep into becoming Alana Kane. She is a badass driver, and she knows how to be focused and calm and really figure out how to do things and, put on this facade that she's got it covered, but really inside she's freaking out. And so when I conquered the truck, which I affectionately called Gertie through the whole process of Licorice Pizza. I loved Gertie. I hated her in the beginning, loved her by the end of it. I'll never forget the first time the cameras were on and the lights were on, I immediately stalled. And I think I looked at Paul with panic in my eyes. I was like, oh God, oh no. And you just went, you got this. And then I, turned it back on, put it in first, and then we were off to the races.
Paul, do you want to say anything about writing that scene and seeing Alana go off to the races with that?
Well, in fact, I've actually these past few days been putting together the DVD. So I've been going through all this footage, and I have incredible footage that will be on there of Alana's truck school, so you can see her learning to drive this truck on this sort of very wide side street over in North Hollywood, and just see the process of her mastering this truck, which already is quite impressive. And then you get to the first day of shooting, and what you realize is that she's not just driving the truck, she's driving the truck with an enormous amount of gear hanging off the side of it. You've got probably 5 or 6 different lights, 2 cameras, piping that surrounds the entire thing. So the truck becomes twice as wide as it already is. It's sort of hilarious to look back at and think that we thought this was a good idea or a safe idea.
That's what
But these are the kinds of things you have to convince yourself of when you're making a film. And I also thought that underneath it all, that, it's always nice for an actor to have something physical to learn or to do. I think we knew that between the 3 of us what these characters were and what our story was, and it didn't even require endless conversations or anything. We all just sort of intuitively understood what we were after. And the important thing, particularly for Cooper, was sort of understanding the period, understanding different ways of speaking. For Alana, it was giving her these, telling her, listen, you're gonna have to drive not only this truck, you're gonna have to drive this car around. There's a number of scenes where they're driving. Mastery of that vehicle was kind of important because I knew we weren't going to be towing it. We were going to have her in charge of that car. And it just seems more authentic. It's also something that helps you get you out of your head. There's no time for acting. Any actor would tell you it's kind of great. You're in a terrific headspace because you're much more concerned for the safety of your life than what might be good. And so the acting comes quite naturally, and fear comes quite naturally as well.
Cooper, what was it like for you being in a Paul Thomas Anderson world and those incredible sets designed by Florencia Martin, whether it was like the Pinball Palace or the water, the water beds, or, talk about going back to that era?
It was just kind of magical, and you kind of escape to this different time. And you really do feel like you're in it, especially because the sets are so great. And the only thing that sometimes would take me out of it was just seeing camera equipment or any sort of equipment that they bring into it. But anything other than that, it was kind of just spectacular. It was great.
Alana, what about for you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, yeah, being on set was my safe place. I feel like I never wanted to leave. That was the problem. I always wanted to stay on set. I always wanted to work. And I've never had a job in my life where waking up at 5 a.m. was the best time of my life. I would wake up every day, put my makeup on, do my hair, drive to set, and then we were just in it. I think the thing that blew my mind the most is I remember when we were shooting the gas station scene and seeing the K-Met billboard and all the little things that the set had. I remember turning to Paul and being like, are we shooting a movie? Is it actually? I had never seen something so grand. I mean, we took it for a Valley girl. Taking over a portion of Ventura Boulevard is the dream. And seeing this gas station, I mean, my mom was blown away. She was like, K-Met? I used to listen to K-Met all the time. I mean, it was just an incredible place to be. And it was so big and grand and amazing. And you were kind of just in it from there.
And, to that, the film has such incredible needle drops throughout. I mean, how much did the soundtrack help you find your characters and, live in their world through that?
For me, I think one of the most important scenes was the opening scene where you hear this Nina Simone song called The July Tree. And Paul had played it for me right before we started shooting, because obviously we couldn't play it over speakers because there was dialogue, but I needed to walk on beat. And that's the only time that being a musician really helps, because I have this metronome in my brain always constantly. And Paul played it for me on headphones. And then we were in it, and it helped so much with the rhythm of the scene and having that metronome kind of beating inside of me. But that was so important. It was so important. And it really did set off the movie on a great start of the journey.
Paul sent me the playlist with like all of the songs and everything on it before we had started shooting. And so every day before I would go to set, I would get up, I would shave, and I would listen to the music. And it was kind of my way of entering into that period or entering into Gary. But the music helps you feel like you're in the time period.
Paul, I'm going to go back to the production design for a second. Like, talk about building Taylor the Cop, which so many people after, whenever they've seen that film, they're like, oh my gosh, like it's such a throwback. Why that was so important for you to have as a set piece in the movie? I think
you're touching on, I think, collectively the one set that if we could have left anything intact, it would probably Tail the Cock, which all of us wish still existed. We'd probably be going there tonight for a martini or a Coke or something like that. That has a lot of personal history for me. Tail the Cock was a restaurant here in Los Angeles. There was two of them. There was one on La Cienega in sort of Beverly Hills area, and then there was another one at Coldwater and Ventura, right in Sherman Oaks. And it was the place that you went as a kid for very important milestones, Mother's Day, birthdays, your grandmother's birthday, something like this. And it was very, very dark inside. You could barely see anything. You would get prime rib. My dad would get a martini on the rocks with a twist. and kids would get Shirley Temples. And the clientele was is this crazy mix of old Hollywood, Hanna-Barbera animators, old movie stars, stuntmen, grips, electric, and then grandmas, and grandmas at that time were like, they were from a completely different time. If you stayed there late enough, we would usually fall asleep as kids, but later you'd hear stories of the kind of things that would happen. And it was usually when guys would have enough to drink. So the kind of episode with Sean Penn and Tom Waits is all loosely kind of based in Valley folklore of stuff that happened at Tail of the Cock or restaurants like it. It's all completely fictional, but has a touch to some of the stories that I remember hearing. Trying to recreate a stunt from one of your films was not that unheard of, probably back at that time.
Alana, I saw your face light up with Tail of the Cock. Do you have a story to share about that set or?
When we got to Tail of the Cock, I feel like it happened at the perfect time. I mean, it was just such a beautiful place to be in for over a week. And just being in a restaurant with the booths and everyone was dressed up and there were waiters and bartenders. And it really did feel like you were stepping through a time machine. And it also helped that I was in a booth with Sean Penn and Tom Waits. I mean, what more can a girl ask for? I think out of all the places that we went to during Licorice Pizza, I feel like Tail of the Cock is my favorite.
It was really wonderful because it was everybody, my kids were there, my uncle was there, my mom and dad were there, all of us were there. It was the one set where everybody could participate. We had a great time over at Fat Bernie's, but that was really all the teenagers, and that was its own kind of fun. It's the environment that you feel when you're in a casino in Las Vegas, is that it's nighttime all day long, and so once we stepped in there at 7:00 in the morning, we didn't really leave until it was dark outside. So it always felt like we were in some just booze soaked atmosphere with stale cigarettes and steaks, and it was and we loved it.
Cooper, I'm going to have to get your input now. What was your favorite set piece to walk into?
Definitely Fat Bernie's. Definitely. That was the best time. I made a lot of friends, I felt like, because, you kind of walk around and that almost felt, even though Tail of the Cock is supposed to be my place, and it was when just me and Alana were there, but then Sean Penn shows up and it's not your place anymore. It's, it becomes Sean Penn's place. But Fat Bernie's was, I want to say I always had control, but I probably didn't as well, because I don't think any of the kids would listen to me. But it felt more fun. Also it was there was a bunch of teenagers around. It felt like a high school party. There was a lot of energy at Fat Bernie's, where at Tail of the Cock it was more serious and it's a restaurant, And I think as a teenager, you would have a better time at Fat Bernie's.
Love it. Well, I want to say thank you so much for that incredible conversation on Licorice Pizza and the insight into your favorite sets and so much more. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Alana, Cooper, and Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.